What strange thing have you witnessed/experienced that you cannot explain? I had a friend in high school who I stopped speaking to when she transferred in grade 10. 2 years later, I have a dream that I visited her new school and sat at the back of her math class with her. In the dream her teacher was tall, brunette with curly hair, and wearing glasses. The next day I get a message on Facebook from said friend, which is completely out of blue because we hadn't spoken in months. She asks me how I'm doing and I tell her about my dream. She freaks out and tells me that she sits at the back of her math class and her teacher fit the description I gave her from my dream perfectly. Out walking around the neighborhood late at night with a friend one night, we would occasionally look up to the sky in awe of the stars. I saw a fast moving light like a meteor, but slower, although much faster than an airplane. Then, it made 2 sharp 90 turns. First to the right, then to the left and disappeared. My friend and I both stopped and said, "Did you see that?" to each other. This was in the late 80s and I can still picture it like it was yesterday. Driving from Cancun to Merida at night. About 10 years ago. Middle of the road there's a huge pothole, so I swerved to avoid it. About 200 meters ahead notice a car's got its hazard lights on. It's parked on the side of the road, so I decided to stop and check to see if they needed help. Thought it might have been a flat tire. I parked, approached the car, and as I got closer I saw what appeared to be 2 passengers in the back. There was no one in the driver's seat and those 2 figures I had seen were mannequins with wigs and faces drawn with a marker or something. Just weird. To me at least. Can't rationalize the whole event. A few years ago me and a bunch of friends were on a cabin trip at my friend's parents' cabin. It was in the middle of nowhere and it was late, so the road was pitch black. We were split up into 2 cars, and I was driving behind the person who knew where we were going. At some point, my friend just starts speeding up, annoying fast. I stops that I'm barely able to keep up. Suddenly, she takes a sharp turn down into a wooded area with only a vague trail. I try to follow, but I'm desperately trying to avoid the massive potholes in my tiny not fit for off-roading car. Meanwhile, the car in front of me is gliding down the path seemingly no problem. I flash my lights for them to slow down, but nothing. I'm pissed at this point, and I'm cursing my friend's name while my passengers sit in silent terror. We finally make it down to a real road, but my friend's car is nowhere to be seen. It was like it vanished out of thin air. Again, the area is pitch black, so if there was any source light we would be able to see it. We're lost as hell and try to call, but we don't have a cell signal. We drive for about 10 minutes before we reach them, find them, and are finally guided to the cabin. I mentioned to my friend about how annoyed I am that she took a dangerous off-road path without warning us and then just disappeared. She then gets a really weird look on her face and says, "What are you talking about? You guys were right behind me and then suddenly you just turned off into the woods. We had no idea where you went. We were really worried." Apparently, she had been on the road the whole time. No one knows who the truck was, where they came from, or where they went. Everyone in both cars never saw a car pull out between us or saw us get broken up. The 3 people in my car are confident that the truck we saw lead us down the woods was my friend's car. Everyone else in the other car assured us they were on the road the whole time. To this day, none of us know where that car came from or how they snuck in between 2 cars without 6 people realizing it. I was at a bar with, and I was talking to some dude I just met, and a girl came over and started chatting us up. Mid-conversation out of nowhere she puts her hand on her head and says to the other guy, "You are from Brownsville." I don't remember the city name, but it is a small town of like 500 people. The dude looked completely dumbfounded and replied that indeed he was from that city. She said that is weird, because once every 2 or 3 years she has these crazy flashes of information about people she is talking to, but don't know them personally. It was really weird and the guy was blown away, and I was kind of in awe. I don't believe in real psychic abilities or anything, but this tested me. Also it could have just been fake and she really knew he was from there, but crazy experience anyway. When I was about 12 I was playing outside on a really windy day and a blue flying thing the size of a water bottle zoomed into my yard and got caught in some spider web in a bush. Its wings were clear, so it wasn't a bird, but the thing was huge and weird. If it was a bug, I lived in the Mojave Desert CA at the time. If anyone can think of something it could have been, and freaking the ps out tangled in the web and branches. It was thrashing so fast I couldn't get a good look at it, and I just kept staring at it in disbelief, cause I couldn't stop thinking that's ups fairy. I go over and try to detach it from the web and it breaks free. At the speed ups it was gone again. I woke up with sleep paralysis with the understanding my uncle died. I get a phone call around 4 AM from my mom to tell me my uncle is on his deathbed and that I should swing by in the morning. Pretty sure it was just his body on the bed, breathing on automatic, and that he left hours back. I was sitting in my college dorm room once when the temperature suddenly started dropping like crazy. I turned the heat up as high as it would go, but it just kept getting colder. I took out my winter clothes and started putting them on. This was like in late September/early October in New York, so it wasn't cold outside at all. I was just about to go ask for maintenance when my roommate got back from hockey practice and asked why there were so many police cars and ambulances outside. I had no idea. Later that night, we were informed a girl who lived in the dorms had died. Everyone who I've told about this says that I felt her death. I was in that same room for 3 years and that was the only time I ever had problems with the temperature. A few years ago, shortly after adopting my dog, by then GF, and I were getting ready to go out for food, or whatever it was. Right as we are getting ready to go out the door, our dog starts freaking out. He's losing his mind, whining, jumping at us, biting at our arms, and trying to pull us to the living room. We take a few extra seconds, calm him down, say goodbye and head out. We had a train to catch. Took all of 30 to 60 seconds. As we were approaching the bus stop, about 30 seconds away from the stop, a BMW comes barreling around the corner and jumps the curb exactly where we would have been standing. Had we left when we originally wanted, we would have been standing there. We never would have seen it coming. To this day I'm convinced my dog knew, and he delayed us for that reason. He's never had an outburst like that since. Years ago my dad's uncle passed away. Years before that, said uncle got my parents a fancy bottle of tequila from Mexico and it's been on the front room display shelf with a bunch of other dust-covered sculptures and glasswork for at least 12 years. It's out of reach, and unto shade no one in my immediate family drinks. On the day of his passing, I'm in the front room reading, and my dad's doing his taxes. We get a phone call with the bad news. My dad continues his taxes while letting me know his uncle passed in a few short words. Not 30 seconds later, and the tequila bottle his uncle got my parents starts playing music. This is odd to me because I thought it was just a bottle, so I ask, do we have a music box? My dad continues his taxes and tells me the bottle has a music box built in, and that was the only reason he kept it. I clarify, did you wind it recently? And he just keeps filing and says nope, and I was ready to leave it at that, but he says still all casually occupied. I imagine Uncle David wanted to say goodbye one last time. That is the only time it has made a noise as long as I've been alive. Of all days and times, I never knew what to make of it. It just made me uncomfortable. I came out of a store one day and turned the corner to see a crow trying to read a paperback novel on a park bench. He was perched on the bench, turning pages with his beak. When he noticed me staring, he hopped away like I caught him red-handed and took flight a moment later. Ended up getting a tattoo of a crow reading a book because the incident left such an impression on me. No one really seems to believe me, but dude, COVID's up smart. I figure it was either imitating a person or trying to harvest the pages for a nest, but either way, strange experience. Edit. Since a couple people asked and missed my reply, here's the tattoo. In the summer I sometimes volunteer as a cabin leader at a summer camp for youth, some of whom are troubled. Last summer we had a kid who got random fits of rage and he would take it out on anything he could. We later found out he had hid his meds from the staff nurse because he came on a bus without any guardians. Obviously this withdrawal had major side effects. His fits started to get more and more extreme, and one day during the daily nap time he erupted at full force and started breaking everything he could and ran out of the cabin, and I was sadly the only person there at the time due to a staff meeting that was occurring. I called another cabin leader who was in the cabin next to ours, and he ran out to find the camper because at this point my whole cabin of about 10 kids were panicking and worried, so I felt uncomfortable leaving them alone. During and after the fit a few of my heavier sleepers stayed asleep, and about 5 minutes later one of them woke up crying and screaming. Most young boys have a sort of pride issue with crying in front of other boys their age, so he asked if he could talk to me along on the cabin's porch. I agreed and walked him out, telling the other campers to try to go back to sleep. He ended up telling me that he was having a nightmare about a skeleton. He didn't say much else about the dream because that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was that he ended up describing to me what was essentially sleep paralysis. I told him about it and he had no idea what it was and was begging me to call his mom to come get him because he said he felt like something was there trying to get him. I ended up researching sleep paralysis with him and showed him everything I could to assure him that nothing was out to get him and explained the science behind it. Here's where it gets weird and still freaks me out to this day. We later had a staff meeting for those who missed the earlier one, and I found out that, while all of this was happening, another boys' cabin and a girls' cabin on the other side of camp each had a camper wake up with sleep paralysis, both describing different nightmares, both having to do with a skeleton. I also later had found out that the cabin leader who had went looking for our "runaway camper" had found him in a grove of trees talking what he called gibberish. And he was hitting a stick against a tree. We called his parents, who explained his situation in more detail, and we found out about him hiding the meds, and we got him calmed down, and the rest of the week went smoothly. After he left, we ended up finding a small drawing pad we had seen him using throughout the weeks with very strange drawings in it. Nothing looked like anything. There wasn't anything graphic or anything about them that was threatening, but for some reason it just seemed unsettling to us all. Almost like the drawings extremely young children do when they scribble. We called his parents, and we offered to ship it to them, but they said he didn't want it. A more skeptical cabin leader ended up burning it because of the situations that happened in the week. I don't really get scared by supernatural stuff, but this was honestly the weirdest / scariest thing I've ever seen my entire life, and I wouldn't even believe it had I not witnessed it myself, and the horror in everyone's faces that were involved. My story isn't nearly as strange as some of the others, but it's one that has stuck with me my whole life. My friend and I used to love to go and hang out in one of the local cemeteries. I guess because we were just weird. This was an older cemetery and was no longer used, so it didn't have any new graves in it. One day while we were hanging out and just wandering around, we stumbled upon a new looking grave marker. It stuck out like crazy because all of the other markers were old and grey and crumbling. On some of them, you could barely make out the names. This marker was much newer and the name and dates was clearly visible. It was also a rather neat red marble color, which was really different from all of the others. We didn't think much of it and just continued our trip through the cemetery. We sat down under this big tree in the middle and talked and laughed and did other stupid kid things. After an hour or so, we decided it was time to leave. We crossed right by where the new grave marker had been, and it was gone. We both kind of freaked out a little bit and searched the whole graveyard looking for the brand new marker, and it wasn't there. We checked for it several more times on different visits and never found it again. It was just weird and something neither of us could ever explain. I've posted somewhere else about this, but it fits. When I was a teenager, we went to our local cemetery to visit our granddad's grave. On the way back to the car, I saw one of those little white crosses on a grave, the kind you put on before you get a headstone. The horizontal but with the name had fallen off onto the grave. I felt bad seeing it, so I picked it up and put it back onto the cross. That night, I woke up, and at the end of my bed I saw a guy sitting in a chair with his head thrown back. His throat looked like it was cut or something. It was an awful mess. He had brown hair, a blue shirt and jeans on. I was absolutely terrified and screamed out for my parents. They came into the room, and it had gone. I haven't touched anything in a graveyard since. Edit. Just to clarify, I do touch things in the graveyard nowadays of the person I'm visiting, flowers etc, but if it doesn't belong to the person I'm visiting, then no deal, mate.